I'm Danny Ray Townsend, and my wife Judy and I were owners of Townsend Sorghum Mill. And we have been in business for my family. I'm the fifth generation sorghum maker. My family's been in the sweet sorghum business for well over 100 years, and we continue to keep making pure, natural sweet sorghum syrup. They tell me I'm the fifth generation. That I'm, all the way back over 100 years. So I, wasn't around at that time, but that's what they tell me anyway. So, but once again, it was a necessity, and there was mills scattered throughout the area, small mills on every other farm, and they was using it as a necessity. So I guess maybe the last couple of generations is when we've actually started marketing it, selling it to other people and stuff. Before it was just making it more or less to have. But I can remember as a young boy of helping my dad October Court Day in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, selling off of the back of a truck, selling sorghum. So he would make it. That was a cash crop, along with tobacco. That was about the only cash crops this part of the country had. So it's been in our family well over 100 years. The sweet sorghum came to the United States around 1850 from Africa and Egypt. And at the time, they thought it was going to be the answer to the sugar cane. They could grow it in the north, be the northern sugar cane. But they got to making syrup out of it, and they found out that it was better for making syrup than it was the sugar. And it was at one time or another, it's been grown in all contingents, 48 states. And traditionally, it's always been grown in more so in the southeastern United States, with Tennessee and Kentucky always been probably the leading producing states, along with Iowa and Nebraska. But Kentucky and Tennessee nowadays is the leading producing states. And it requires a whole lot less water than corn or sugar cane. It'll grow in a more hot, arid region. It doesn't require near as much fertilizer. You take a couple of 100 pounds of fertilizer and good seed, it's not a hard crop to grow. You got to keep the weeds and the grass and stuff out of it, but under any kind of conditions, you can raise a good crop. And just like this year, we've been really dry and really hot, and we've got cane that's 14 feet tall, and it's producing over 200 gallons of syrup to the acre. So, that gives you some kind of indication of how good a crop this stuff is for dry regions. So, but once again, remember that this crop came from Africa and Egypt, where it is really hot, and there they used the whole stalks. Typically, back in 100 years ago, while they would cut the stalks down, they would cut them by hand, and then they would cut the heads off, and they would save the heads, to feed the chickens and the turkeys, and also they was good for hog feed. Anything, it was grain, 98%, the protein and stuff of corn. And then they would a lot of them would strip the leaves, from the stalks. A lot of the old timers and stuff, the method that they used to cook the sorghum, they didn't want to run the green juice right into the pan, and then those leaves and stuff that actually made extra work for the animals, either the oxen or the mules or horses that pulled the mill. That's what they had. They had just a small 3-roller mill, and they had a mule that would circle, and when if they put the leaves through, that just made a much more load on him to pull. And then they would strip those leaves off, and they would feed them to the cattle, fodder. That made good. So, and then even after the stalks had been, the juice had been squeezed out of them, well, then they would also feed them back to cattle and stuff. So, it was, very labor intense. It was all, hand labor. They loaded on sleds or wagons or whatever and pulled it in with teams. And even nowadays, to get, there's a few people, a few operations that's mechanized, but to get the quality of sorghum that we want, we still are very much labor intense, and of course that drives the price of the sorghum up. So we'll have men come through and pick up each bundle, and they'll take them and load them on the wagons. And then they'll bring the wagons into the mill, and then we have the mill that we have now is probably 75, 100 years old. It was designed to pull with steam, and now we're using it, the PTO on a tractor. And a man will feed the stalks through a 3-roller mill and squeeze the juice out, and we pump that into a refrigerated tank. Cools the juice down. We keep it up to 3 days in the refrigerated tank, and then we pull it out and pump it into what we call our preheating tanks. and we preheat all we're gonna, sometimes the night before, sometimes the morning of when we're gonna cook. And we'll preheat the juice to 170 degrees and then let it sit for a couple hours. Gets rid of a whole lot of the green skimmings. That was one of the things that I always told my dad about. I mean, I said, we're killing ourselves trying to keep this green skimmings off. There's got to be a better way. So we figured out that was, we just make a tank a whole separate, part of the process. And now when the juice enters our pan, well, it looks, like almost like iced tea. We've done removed 90% of those skimmings before it reaches our pan. We don't have to fight them on the pan. We can spend more time watching our sorghum stuff and doing the skimming. And it is very labor intense, but it's back then they had big families and they needed to keep something busy. So nowadays I have to hire people to help. I can't do it all myself. So Dad always had his own way of cooking sorghum. He was from the old school, and they had one variety of sorghum that they would grow, and they squeezed the juice and immediately run it into the pan, and they didn't have any age, now we use a thermometer to check and make sure it's all a consistent product and that kind of stuff. It was strictly, by his experience that he used, and he used his skill to tell when the sorghum was done, was finished, ready to be took off the pan. And as a young kid and stuff, I always wanted to, why don't you try this and why don't you try that, and he always he used what we call a high pan. I always use a low. In other words, he had a little bit thicker volume of juice in the pan, and I'd always let the pan run down a little bit to where I wouldn't near have the thicker volume of juice on the pan. It would just be maybe a quarter of an inch thick. And he kept telling me that I was going to burn the pan. I wasn't boiling the sorghum. I was trying to fry the sorghum. So it was always, to me, that the lower the volume of juice you had in that pan, the quicker it would boil and the quicker you could get it out of the pan. And he always told me that I would never be able to make sorghum, that I couldn't the way I was going to. And I told him, I said, well, if I have to cook the way you're going to, I don't know where I want to or not. I had my own ideas and stuff, and at the time, it took me 30 years to get them implemented, but we finally got them in and stuff. But he knew how to cook sorghum. He makes some beautiful sorghum. Always had a reputation of making sorghum, throughout the country, and actually made for other people. They would bring their their crops they would raise maybe in a half acre or something, and they would cut it and bring it to the mill, and then he would cook it, process it for them, and he always cooked with wood. We always used wood fire, and I was the one that changed it, started cooking with gas, and then eventually involved them in cooking with steam. But it was always, we'd work all spring and cutting all the slabs and wood and stuff, getting everything ready to make the sorghum that fall. My first memories of being cooking sorghum was just as you cross the little Clay Lick Creek on the right was my great grandfather's farm. Part of it was, and I remember my dad and Grandpa they had two pans set up on the side of that bank, and one experience really happened when I was 3 years old, and they cooked sorghum the day before, and in the morning they was washing their pans, and they'd always pull the ashes out from under the furnace, and they would get gray on top, and you couldn't see the hot coals, but down and under there was hot coals, and then the men would walk through the coals, had shoes on, and I was 3 years old, and I got one foot in it before Daddy reached and grabbed me, so I got burnt pretty bad. So I have some memories of that experience, being around the sorghum mill. So I tell everybody, I said I didn't have sense enough to stay away, so I'm still around here. So, but every field is the different types of soil and stuff, and some of them you can actually tell when the cane is coming in the field. We've been making all this, these fields and stuff so long that I can just about tell you where that cane was grown when I'm in here cooking it now, because everyone's got its own characteristics, and sometimes it will make a little bit difference in the finished syrup. Sweet sorghum has always been made, for syrup, for eating, and in this part of the country it was always for, mostly for biscuits or cooked with, make candies, cakes, and all kinds of food products, and and I think it will always continue to be that. But it's really becoming, getting in the news now as far as an energy crop. Of course, they're using corn for ethanol, and Brazil is originally, they're almost totally independent of of oil, and they're using the juice from the sugar cane. So I think every university in the United States and probably in the world are looking at sweet sorghum for ethanol. Ethanol has a high, or sweet sorghum has a high sugar content, and when it comes down to making ethanol, it's what will produce the most sugar or the most energy per acre at the lowest possible cost. So I've kind of always thought that that they should be looking for sweet sorghum, and they finally got around to it, and I think it's going to be an energy crop. We're working here on the farm. We're working to see what kind of yields you can actually get. Sometimes when we do these experiments and these companies are trying to sell equipment and stuff, some of that will kind of be maybe inflated a little bit or something like that. So we're trying to see just exactly what kind of yield that we can get and what varieties, and that may be, but I think there'll always be a use for for sorghum for eating purposes. I don't think that will ever happen. I think as long as I live anyway, I'll always be making that. But we may be growing hundreds or even thousands of acres for for the energy crop, and I think that's something's going to evolve out of that. I mean, it's the corn is taken. It takes 1 unit of energy to make 1.5 units of ethanol, but sweet sorghum is a whole lot better than that. It only takes 1 unit of energy to make like 5 or 6 units of ethanol from sweet sorghum. So it does have a whole lot higher sugar, and it is a whole lot cheaper to grow. Not as near as much fertilizer. It doesn't require the water. The seed is relatively cheap, and we do sell seed. We've started a little seed business several years ago. The byproduct. So, but I think you'll see and you'll hear a whole lot more out of sweet sorghum for energy crop in the near future. Sorghum will yield some of the early maturing varieties like sugar drip. The earlier the maturing, the lower the yielding. Sugar drip, it'd go maybe 75, 100 gallons to the acre, and some of the other the later maturing varieties, it will produce anywhere from 100 to 200 gallons a yield. Depends on the season. Mostly depends on the sugar content of the juice. The higher the sugars in the juice, the less water you have to evaporate to get the syrup. So we have one variety now. One variety it's really high in the sugar. It's called K.N. Morris, and it was a joint venture between the University of Kentucky and the University of Nebraska, and it was named after a professor at UK, Morris Spitzer, so it's called K.N. Morris. But it really has high sugar. Most of the sugars run up here. We measured on the Brix refractometer, and it run about 16 to 18. But that stuff it run 23 and 24. So when they start looking for an energy crop, that may be the variety that they look for. But that and the growing season, it affects the yield. Even the soil will at some time. But the poorer the soil, they always said the poorer the soil would make the better sorghum. Well, not much fertilized, and the juice was real sweet, and it didn't take a whole lot of cooking. The quality of the sorghum sometimes will depend on the length of the time that you cook. The lower the sugar, the more water you have to cook out of it. So sometimes it may be you're cooking more water out of it, or you're cooking it longer, which may make it a little darker, or a little bit more sorghum flavor. So everything really has to do with the yield and the quality. I like to see everybody be able to enjoy the taste and the health benefits of sweet sorghum. Sweet sorghum syrup is one of the most nutritional sweeteners that you can eat. So if you're going to eat sugar, you should be getting some nutrients out of it. This crop originated from Africa. In Africa, they used the whole plant. They used the juice, or they used the seed to make, it's a cereal type seed. It's a 4F crop. This is a remarkable crop. Food, fuel, fiber, and feed. I mean, it's this total crop. So I'd like to see some kind of organization or somebody that, of course, that would be good for the farmers. They could grow more and make more sorghum and stuff. But it is a pure natural sweetener. That's one thing that we like about it. It's not processed. It doesn't go through all the other filters and bleaches and all that, like the granulated sugar. When it comes out of the pan, it's pure natural. It contains no preservatives or artificial flavors, colors. All we do is just take the raw juice out of the sweet sorghum plant. Most time it takes about 8 gallons of that juice to make 1 gallon of the finished syrup. All we do is remove the impurities and the water in a timely fashion and cool it when it gets done, that we have a good thick syrup. And where it's going from there, why, that's beyond me. I don't know. I'm cooking it right now. I have 2 sons and a grandson. Were they going to continue? I mean, that's up to them. I love it. They don't like it near as good as I do, but it's yet to be seen.